Super. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I hope you're having an awesome Animex. And this is such an honor. I'm very proud to be here and not only talking Animex, but also talking about my short film, Cat and Moth. It's been quite the roller coaster, and it all, well, the very sort of like conception started when I was at university at Teesside. So this is like a nice circle of life, I guess, in terms of the film. All right, I will get on. So, as I said, my name's India Barnardo. I'm a director and I'm also an animator. I currently work at Sony Image Picture Works, and we're working on an animated feature that's unannounced, so I can't talk about it. But I've worked in several different disciplines. I've worked at Framestore, VFX, in the commercials department. I've worked at MPC, Studio AKA. I've also worked in games, worked on Oddworld, Soulstorm, Crash Bandicoot, It's About Time. I've also worked on a few features, so The Willoughbys, which is on Netflix, Ballerina, I think, is maybe on Netflix. I'm not sure where it is now. And then currently now I'm at Sony. My journey as an animator started at Teesside in 2006, which I think is about 12 or so years ago now. Graduated in 2009. And actually it was that last year of, I think it was that last year of university, I remember sitting at a picnic bench and scribbling these shapes, I guess, graphical shapes. And this meant that Ditto came to life, our fluffy white cat. And I was doodling these shapes and it just came together as something I really wanted to pursue. I really liked that sort of graphic nature and 2D-ness of it. Yeah, so that's where it sort of began. And I want to basically, today, I want to go over the sort of origins, how we made our production and where we are at today. So Cat and Moth, it's about a fluffy white cat called Ditto. Hopefully you can see her. And all she wants is to find the most comfiest spot in the universe. But obviously someone else has their eye on it too, hence the title, which I'm sure you've worked out. So Monty is our moth. He is the antagonist to Ditto's nap time. And it all began with this vaguely embarrassing photo of me and my cat Leia. I was about 10 or 11, I think, and she was tiny. You can see she's not very big, and neither am I. So maybe that was the good combo. I was able to hold her in the palm of my hand, in one hand, which is very small. And in my bedroom, I had this lamp at the end of my bed that was kind of open and would often have moths. We lived in the countryside and moths would fly around it. Anyway, I don't know what possessed me, but one day I picked her up in my hand and held her up to the light. And she would just munch the moths right out of the air, which is pretty, was weird, I thought, but also really cool because it meant I didn't have to worry about the moths anymore. And so that image really stuck in my head. It still does to this day. So then it was coming up with the characters and the story. So as I said, I'd already doodled and sketched those sort of graphic shapes of Ditto. She's basically 3 balls. And it started off by drawing a lot of cats and really honing down those shapes. And Monty came a little bit later. His shapes were influenced by her, but I wanted him to be a bit more, I go back. I wanted him to have a little bit more angle to his face, and obviously his antennae are crooked, and it's trying to find that sort of juxtaposition against Ditto's fluffy white round shapes. That's how we decided to sort of run with those shapes and designs. And then another big thing was influences, right? Inspiration. And this really helped us come I guess, bring together the characters and start to develop a story that these characters would be within. And I kind of had always had this idea that the light, the cat and the moth are sort of this love triangle, I guess, or sort of there's some kind of connection between them. And the way I really felt like we could portray these characters was a combination of 2D and stop motion, and also CG, because me and my friend who I work with at Frame Store, Amar, we got together, I guess like 2011, I think, where we decided we wanted to take this a bit further and take it more seriously. And yeah, between our sort of CG sensibilities from working together, we really were just fascinated by the tactile feeling of 2D and stop motion. So Wallace and Gromit was a massive influence. Just that I really love miniature pieces, you know, like doll houses and tiny furniture. There's something very endearing. And Wallace and Gromit has that in Barrel Falls. And just that feeling like it's very homely, and something about you feels like you're making it with your own hands. So I wanted to try and get that despite it being CG. We looked at MC Escher. I really like the tessellated shapes and the sort of looping idea of the cyclical way of his work. I've also got Maurice Noble, Dr. Seuss, got Peanuts. Peanuts and the CG Looney Tunes was really cool, like seeing how they used 2D to influence the CG. There's so many of those we tried to combine. It was really fun experiment. So I'm going to move on to our proof of concept. This was actually, at the time, it didn't feel like such a milestone. It was something I wanted to do anyway. I did a little 2D animation test with Ditto. So it's the first time we got to work on developing the character as her movement rather than just drawings and just paper. And it really took us down a path of like, we can do this. This is something that is achievable, like executable. And it was the first time that, yeah, we felt we discovered her character. So that was a little, basically I had a 3D print of the sofa design that we were looking to go with. And I took a very like abstract photo of it. And then I animated Ditto over the top of it. This kind of came about because we started doing some stop motion tests. We were going to have stop motion in the film before, until we realized how hard it is. And so we tip our hat off to stop motion animators. It was just like another layer of expertise that we maybe couldn't take on. We'd already taken on too much, I think. So this was kind of my homage to that. And yeah, this really led to us feeling like we knew more about the character and more about like how to model her and how to rig her in CG. This really told us a lot. Once we had the model and the rig of Ditto, these are like initial tests, we decided to try and recreate it in CG. It's a little low quality of the play blast, but hopefully it shows that we'd made progress, right? We were trying to get those shapes that signified the 2D drawings, and it's not easy. If I play it again, you know, trying to get those like round ball-like shapes, trying to get, you can barely see it in this playlist, but she's got that really sort of thin tail that builds up to a spiral. And it felt like we were progressing because we were able to get something that felt like what we were after. Then as production was coming together, we decided that it would be a good idea to put a teaser together. We were very, this was like 2018 now, So we'd done quite a lot at this point, and we were like, yeah, get the teaser ready, show the teaser, film will be done soon, and then we can show it to the world. Obviously now it's 2021 and we're just finishing the movie now. So we're a bit overzealous, I guess, enthusiastic about our timeline at that point. But what I didn't realize at the time until probably much later after we'd finished this, it wasn't a teaser, it was a proof of concept for our whole pipeline. It proved that we could have groom on our main characters. It proved that we could put it all together. And it proved that we had this sort of mixture of styles that we wanted the 2D and the CG to integrate with one another. It really led the way for the rest of the film and how it looks today. The look is a little out of date now, but it's not miles away from where we've landed. And it really showed us like any holes in our pipeline. It was really useful. And I feel like this is something I would make in the future, just to test all your, all the ducks you've got in line, you want to test them out, right? So I'll play it. There should be a little bit of sound, so hopefully that comes through. Yeah, so that is our teaser still, but it became a much bigger entity, something that really just proved that from paper we could get something finally rendered. And the team was super excited, obviously, and they're like, right, let's finish this movie and get it out there. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to go into production now and basically show how we move from paper to screen. So I moved around a lot during this time over the 10 years. I was in the UK, in London, obviously started at Teesside, and then moved to Montreal, back to the UK, and now in Vancouver. And so everywhere I went, there's basically a wall of Post-it notes that would follow me around, covering all the story. I have it in like piles locked away now somewhere. And the thing I love about discovering story this way, especially with other people to bounce ideas off of, is you can easily just move those Post-it notes, right? If you're like, oh, this shot isn't working here, try it here. Oh, it feels much better, right? It's an easy way to try out ideas, and it's cheap and almost free. Free in terms of how much time you put into it. You know, if I was to do this in Photoshop, or even if I was trying to do it in CG or something, it'd take a whole lot longer. Whereas we can be in a meeting, I can scribble some Post-it notes and we can slap them on the wall and try them out. So then obviously the natural progression is to discuss the animatic and the edit. And I really was set on getting a really strong story reel. I wanted it to be a really strong outline for the rest of the production. It was definitely trickier than I anticipated, and probably didn't get as locked down as I would have liked early on, but it's all a learning procedure, right? Obviously with an animated film, edit is one of the first things apart from story that comes in really, really early, and it's such an important part of the process. It outlines the rest of the film. And also with that, I really like to include music and sound within that discussion. So we had people on board very early on talking with editorial and our story team to work out how the music and the sound effects would play their part. We have an animatic here. There's no sound on this video, but it will show you our initial animatic pass. Okay, it's not very long. You see my drawings were not that great, but it tells what we needed it to tell. You can see also there's a few CG set. We'd at this point had started our modeling, I guess, production line. And so we had some of that to help us with some of the staging for the animatic, which was actually really useful. It really helped you gauge more interesting perspectives, I guess, at least from my skill in terms of storyboarding. So I really recommend even probably just having a cube or something to represent a rough environment can be really helpful. So then we went into, obviously we had a lot of visual development on the movie. We went into quite a lot of detail. I would usually do some little scrappy drawings and paintings, and then the artist would do these beautiful paintings that you can see, I hope. And we had a lot of extensive color key exploration and different points in the movie that we thought were standalone pieces that really needed the time to be explored in color and light. And this gave the lighters, a lot of information to work from. And as I said, we were working at this time as well on modeling. So we would have our design packets created and we'd have the modelers going full at it. We got a lot of different props. We wanted that dollhouse cluttered feel. One of our modelers went out and took a lot of pictures from like their grandma's house and had all these really cool like trinkets and just things that would fill up the environment to make it feel full. It was kind of, the idea for that was I wanted it to feel like a little shoebox that maybe someone had made, and they filled it all up because they got really excited and they wanted all these pieces to feel like home. And so this is where a lot of the items came from, different experiences in people's lives and family. Same goes for the characters too. You can see we've got Ditto and Monty there. They're sort of starting to get their shape. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you can see where there's some shapes that aren't quite working yet. But that design process is really tricky because her anatomy is sort of a blob. So it was really interesting working along with the modelers for that. So we also have our very own James Butler, who also was in my year at university. So he helped on the film too, which was really cool. He would paint these awesome, we call them design packets. So I'd give him some scribbles of something I would want an asset in one of the shots, and he would go away and make it look really cool. And then it would transform magically into CG. It was incredible. I couldn't believe how close the texturing and look dev got to James's work and also all the other artists. It's just really cool to see that transformation. And I really love this asset. It feels like a little toy, but also it's not perfect, right? It's disheveled, and yeah, there's just something really satisfying about seeing those come to life. This is the kind of thing I would have looked at uni and thought they probably just painted over it because it's so close, but we didn't, I promise. Okay, and then so more into the look dev. So we had these little scenes set up because we didn't have all our compositions finalized. We would set up these little scenes, it doesn't make much sense in terms of the plug sockets right in the middle of the room, but it's just to see how the items fitted together, if they were coherent, if the colors make sense. A big thing was our tessellated wallpaper and finding the right color for that to complement all the other assets we had. That was really tricky. That took a long time to get right, or maybe not right, but felt good. And it was really hard to make sure that all of those pieces work together because the whole film is set in one room. And so the wallpaper is almost the backing for everything. It has to work with those. And then we have rigging. Yay. Here's a little GIF of me trying to give an example of how we want the belly to move. The rigs were really, really complicated, but in a really cool way. It helped a lot of, deformers and controls to really help bring those shapes from the drawings. And that's really tricky to do, especially with her sort of, I'd say, lack of anatomy. She does. We did plan where all her joints are, but it's still, we want those graphic shapes. So there's like another layer of complexity we found. We did more or less try to avoid shaping stuff after we'd animated. So making additive blend shapes, I guess, or using the shape tool in Maya. We wanted to get what we could from the rig. The rig team did such a great job with all of the props and both the characters. I just wanted to show you a little bit of how we went about working with Ditto. So we had the initial, this test that I showed you earlier, the CG version of the 2D test. And I would do drawovers of that, of how actually the tail should look on certain frames, and if it was possible to get that with what we had already, and if it wasn't. So you can see in the moving bit, you can see how we were trying to get those more curvy graphic shapes that we weren't able to find just yet. And you can see also in the topology drawovers, just, really trying to hone down those graphic shapes. And my favorite slide, groom. We had to make her fluffy, right? So we tried out a lot of things, lots of tests, which means lots of fun fails like this one. And this is where we came to. The groom was such a big part of the process. It's such a technical, I guess, feat to take on. And I'm really glad we did in the end. We did start with trying to think about maybe she was made out of like paper that have been painted, or, maybe she was 2D cell shaded, all those sort of 2D CG hybrids. But in the end, I think the groom actually combines, because of her shape, she feels 2D in some ways, but the groom links, I feel, the CG and the 2D elements. So for instance, in this slide, the light beam that comes down is a 2D comp. I don't want to say trick. Trick is a rubbish word, but it's meant to be a 2D shape with CG lighting to make it feel like a beam of light. And then you've got the CG groom and the 2D shapes. So trying to mix all those things together, I think really the groom really was like the sort of glue between those. We also have 2D effects and 2D animation. So it's another element to try and integrate. And again, I think this really sold it. So the groom team and Amar did such an amazing job. Super impressed with the way it looks. And okay. And then, so as you saw earlier, we have the animatic. So then we move on to layout. We've got our rig in a position where we can use it for layout now. And we had our layout team, small but mighty, and they had to translate the boards into our CG world. It's not animation focused, so the idea is that we're concentrating on the camera and just general placement of the characters. This was the building blocks of our animation. So then we move on to animation, 2D and 2D effects. It was a really cool collaboration because you've got the 12 or 13 CG animators, I should say, and then we had probably similar 2D and 2D effects animators as well. So it's really all those departments coming together now. And while this is happening, we've got look dev still going on in the background and starting to put together lighting tests and things like that. The 2D and 2D effects getting integrated as well, making sure they get the CG animation so they've got something to go from. All right. So then we move on to lighting. Lighting, this is, as I was explaining the beam earlier, this is basically a lot of different tests for how the edges of the beam could look. Lighting, we had a big team. It was really cool. And they really brought another, again, raised the bar. And we spent a long time working out how to really incorporate. We used a few different things. So we have Artella, which was an online collaboration platform And that housed all of our CG elements, all our Maya files, all our caches, all of those, the lighting scenes, everything like that. And then we were also sponsored by the Foundry. So we had Nuke to help us composite it all together. And so we came up with, together with the lighting and comp lead, we came up with a way of how to integrate the two platforms, program platform, and how to organize that as a team. We would give rotation of obviously like feedback and things like that. And it was a really collaborative process, trying to find the way, the right look. And the team were really good at sharing, if they discovered a solution to something, they were really great at sharing it with one another. And we kept this incredible document that Amanda, our lead lighter, had started. And it was just this amazing like FAQ, all the things you need to know if you join the team. how to set up the shots, how to use the groom, how to integrate our 2D and CG lighting. So it was really, really cool, and working really closely with the visual development artist that I mentioned earlier. Their color keys helped obviously inform the lighting, and then the lighters would go away and light something. And then we would have maybe one of the artists do some paint overs just to help with the direction of that. And you can see here one of my screenshots of like how I would communicate my notes. So often I would use different colors, and then we used another platform called Trello to distribute the notes. And I would obviously write number 1, whatever my note was for this, I don't remember. Number 2 was probably fix the ear color there, the inside of the ear. And number 3 would have been her eyes were feeling a bit like holes rather than on top of the fur. So yeah, we would do that as a process, and they would get their feedback and do their notes. And we would do this all via Trello and Zoom. So every other Sunday, we would have a team meeting where we all came together and we would discuss any problems, any questions. And it gave time for the other departments to converse too. So they're not all, everyone's not just working separately. And we did that I think we had those meetings for about 4 years, I think, altogether. So yeah, it was made for a really collaborative team effort, which leads me on to the team. Hurrah! The team were incredible, so fantastic. From, I think, about 2015-ish, we started to roll people on using Artella. There was like a talent pool, we could grab people. Or they could apply to join us. It was a collaborative project. Everyone was just doing it out of pure enjoyment. I always wanted to make people feel like, obviously, only do it if you really want to be a part of it. There's no pressure. Life happens. If you have to go, it's fine, all that sort of thing. Also, we were very remote. We were pre-COVID, I guess, like 4 years of remote collaboration. We've been doing the Zoom meetings for at least 4 years before COVID happened. We live all around the world. I think last I counted, we were covering about 15 different countries, which is insane to me. It became the new normal for us back then. And we got to meet in person, a few of us, not everyone. I think we had about 100 people help all together over the 10 years of the film being made. But in some cities and some towns, we got to meet in person, different festivals. If people are there, we try and make sure they're able to meet up. Artella really helped us find those people all around the world. I have a few, obviously, friends and family involved, but mostly people that I may have never met before are now I'm really good friends with, and it's lovely. And it's just, if you're thinking about making a film, and it doesn't have to be a team this big, it wasn't necessarily the initial plan, but it's a great way to build like a community of people that have a similar passion or goal. I really recommend it. It's a lot of fun, and it just it just brings people together. And I think there's it's easy to just do it on my own, it's easier, or something like that. And I don't know, I recommend working with at least a little group of people that really are dedicated to it. It's definitely a fulfilling, I find it a very fulfilling experience, and I don't think it would look anywhere near the way without them. Oh, no way, no way. Like me and Amar at the very beginning, we're like, we just want to do it, us two. We'll be great. We'll get it done. We'll do it in a year. It'll be a minute long, which obviously none of those things happened. 10 years later, we are finishing it up, and 100 people later, and it's about 6 minutes long. So, you know, there's definitely ways things can evolve, but it was just all for the best, because I met all these incredible artists and people. And you'd be surprised. I did a talk at CTNX in, I think it was like 2017-ish. Me and my producer were there, and we were talking about the film and catching up. Anyway, I was on a panel, and the people on the panel were other creators, and they worked on some really cool stuff. And we were discussing beforehand about our projects. And they were talking about all these, they had leads and all these like coordinators and stuff, and people that they would delegate work to. And I didn't have any of that. We didn't have any of that. I decided that I should take all the burden, because it's meant to be fun for everyone else. And why would anybody want to have responsibility outside of their day job, especially a passion project like this? So I was trying to take all of that on, but also then I became a big bottleneck in that production, I guess production pipeline. And from that conversation, I spoke to my producer after our talk. We went and sat down. We're like, we should think about, maybe we should consider this. It seems like everyone else is doing it. We just bit the bullet. We emailed a few people that we thought would be like really good for those roles. And it was unanimous. They were all like, yes, I'd love to do that. I'd love it. And it was amazing. So from that moment on, I think the project took a real turn. We had leads of each department, which now seems crazy that we didn't have that. And they would take care of their team, especially in terms of, you know, expertise. They know way more than I do about lighting, texturing, or whatever it is. And they can inform their team technical or creative things about their discipline that I would never be able to do. And I wasn't trying to do those things. I just wanted to be like, take away the burden of organization from anyone so they could just have fun. But actually turned out that they really enjoyed it, and the leads were amazing, and I can't thank them enough. So yes, I really, that's something I really wanted to say, because I really recommend, if you do have a good amount of people, I guess, it's a great way to bring the team together and share the load. Okay, so this is the big moment. We got to put it all together. And this point, you know, edit, music, and sound effects are working really closely together, making sure we're in sync, making sure everything's looking how it should be. You know, it becomes trickier back and forth, because if you have to make a change in the edit, music and sound effects get affected. So it's really trying to reduce any of that. And also different things, you know, you get the music and sound effects and it changes some things in the edit. So there's kind of a chicken and the egg type situation when it comes to this part of the film towards the end. But it's really fun. It's really cool seeing them come together and seeing the compositing and the sound, like building that image up. And that's that. So that's it all come together. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that was a little insight to how you could potentially make a film too. I really encourage it. It's a lot of fun, and I can't wait for your questions. I hope I can help in some way.
Thank you so much, India.
No problem. My pleasure.
It's looking great.
Thank you.
You've answered a lot of the questions I'd written down.
Oh, that's good.
But let's put it out to the rest of the audience. Feel free to chip in with other questions, people. I was curious to hear, will you enter it into Animex screen? That's the question.
Oh, I would love to, yes.
There you go. Good.
Put it on our list.
Yeah, so I was interested in how you formed a team. I saw I didn't know how much of it was word of mouth, but when you started using the platform, then you could start actively looking for people.
Yeah, I think definitely at the beginning, it was more of the platform we used. That platform has now gone more like private. You can apply to be on it, and they'll support you. But it used to be completely open because they were just testing it out. So that started bringing together the sort of beginning core team, I would say, like the modelers and stuff. Then more and more started to reach out to family and friends a bit. But what we found is that I think finding people through the platform, and actually as well, like putting ads out on Facebook, and not ads, but posts on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all of those ways, through those channels, we found probably our core team. Whereas I think with friends and family, it's trickier because you're trying to call in a favor with your friend or whatever, and it's a little trickier because they're doing it for you, whereas the other people that you found that you aren't friends with yet are doing it because they want to be part of the project. And so we found that became our sort of, I guess, most stable part of the process, I guess. Obviously everyone's contribution was amazing, but it was definitely a surprise to me that someone I'd never met before was so dedicated to this project. And now we're all friends. It's great. But yeah, it's really interesting going through that.
Yeah, I mean, and there's another question that's coming here. Was it a continuous process over the years? Or was there pauses? I mean, obviously you're working very hard in a full-time job, relocating from continent to continent, and amazing to get to that point.
More or less, I would say, from leaving university in 2009 to about 2015, it was probably just on and off, like we were doing little tests. Did a little stop motion test, did some other things. We tried out some different like fur systems and stuff like that. And then just before I moved away, we started to dig a bit more deeper into it. And then in Montreal, we were doing a lot of the story, although a lot of those storyboard pictures were from there. And then when we moved back about a year later, that's when it really took off, because I took about a year off from working and doing bits like freelance and stuff, but mostly concentrating on the film. And that's where we really got production going. And those freelance projects basically sort of paid for all the little gaps, like, pick a job up, pay for it to be able to work on the film a bit longer.
That's cool. I mean, just keeping that drive going over that period of time is fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely important to be, especially if you've got people that aren't initially your friends working on it. It's definitely important to just keep up that enthusiasm and constant, like, not barrage of messages or anything, but communication of like progress, like, hey, we're working on this, and making sure the rest of the team know there's stuff happening. James, who I mentioned in the presentation, I remember when I asked him to join, he was a bit dubious because he was like, well, I've been on these before and they just fizzle out and stuff. And I was like, I don't want it to fizzle out. The goal is to finish a thing. And so I realized that it was really important just to show everyone this progress every week. But
yeah, cool. That was from Penny, that one.
Hi,
Penny. Another question that's come in, it says, they really love those graphic designs you've done, and quite strong graphically. Is it difficult to animate a cat that's that spherical with those tiny legs?
Yeah, it definitely was tricky. There's not a whole lot of shots where it's like, she's not like slowly walking around or anything like that. But you kind of come up with her own language, I guess, in the way she moves. We would treat her more like a bouncing ball, and the legs were just kind of along for the ride a lot of the time. So if she's like jumping down, she's just a ball really, and we've just sucked the legs up into inside her. But we also had this really cool control that we had on the ground, like a lattice. So when she hit the lattice, she would just squash into it. So you can just sort of, it was more like designing shape frames rather than worrying about the actual, like, how anatomically she should walk, I guess.
Cool. No, it's fantastic. I mean, obviously it's evolved over the 10 years. Initially you had that first idea, 1 minute. How just comparing what it was like from your initial sort of concept and idea to where it is now, how much obviously it's expanded, but is it what you wanted?
On the most part, yes. It's funny, we were looking not that long ago, looking back at the old animatics. And, you know, over the years, you're doing the story, you're trying to rework it and try and get it the best you can. And story is king and all that stuff. And you're throwing out ideas, you're putting new ones in, blah, blah, blah. And we watched like the final, well, almost final version. And then we were watching the old ones. And we're like, hey, some of these ideas just came back. Like, this is really close to what we had in the beginning. Why did we spend all that time, you know, throwing them out and putting them in? But what I discovered is that a lot of those initial ideas, like your gut, I guess, first pass or whatever, is maybe they don't quite make sense then. But when you've put a lot of effort into trying to get the story to work, and ours is a bit of a, you have to put puzzle pieces together to get it to work. I realized that those gut reactions were not necessarily bad or wrong. They just weren't right at that time, and they fit back in because you've worked out all the other problems. And so it's never really a waste of time, like feeling like, oh, we redid the story, but it's kind of similar. I think you have to sometimes go through that process. And I think since then as well, there's some story formulas that I think would have helped. There's some lectures on YouTube about how you can use formulas to like open your story and close your story out. And I think in hindsight, that would have made things a little bit, not simpler, I guess, but I think things would have made more sense. We were learning as we went. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the evolution. And in the end, I felt like we needed to give the ideas the time they needed. So I think a 1 minute film is fine. And I remember actually I was telling someone the other day, there's, I don't know if it was Penny, but someone showed us those 60-second film competitions. And there was one where there was like a granny pushing a trolley up a really steep hill and it was really windy and she's like, ugh. And you know, she gets out of shot, she's pushed the trolley all the way up. And then the punchline is she's in the trolley sliding all the way back down, like, wee, you know, like she wasn't trying to get home. She was just wanting to ride the trolley down the hill. And to me, that's like 1 minute. That's a perfect, like, it's one beat. It's easy to grasp and it's not too crazy. And I think when I thought, oh, 1 minute film, I was trying to fit all these like story arcs in and all this, like, it was just too much for something like that. So when you're considering making a film and the length, definitely would reconsider like what you want to tell and what it would fit into, I think.
Yeah, I remember that one as well myself.
Oh,
so that kind of leads us on to this question quite nicely, which you kind of answered a little bit, is, so what would be the biggest tips looking back you'd give your past self about starting or running a production?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
oh, yes. So as I mentioned, definitely if you need a lot of people to fill the gaps, which is why we decided consciously, is that okay, someone might have an hour a week to help us on the production. If we want to do this in an okay time, then we need, I don't know, 10 people that have an hour each to make up enough hours to, you know, to get any progress. So that meant obviously we had ended up with a lot of people. And I think with that in mind, definitely putting leads in early. And I think there's a couple of departments where I realized later on that we should have collaborated more. So we had an FX department where we have in that sequence some of the CG assets smash. We're using Houdini for that. And then we have 2D on the top of it to sort of integrate it. But we realized later on that when we brought FX in with Houdini, we hadn't really considered that when we were modeling. In hindsight, it would have been nice to obviously have the modelers know what was going to smash and that how it needs to be modeled for Houdini to be able to do it nicely and not painfully. Things like that, I think, were just, yeah, having someone, or even just like a consultant. It doesn't have to be a person that will stay on your team for the whole movie, but just asking someone to come on and just advise what would be best. We did have that a little bit, like we had like a compositing consultant, I guess, for a bit, and some visual development consultant people that would just come in and say, you should plan for this thing, you know, inevitably. A couple of other things, like we spent a lot of time with naming conventions for all the like assets and modeling and all the separate piece of each model. But what I didn't realize until recently is in the compositing phase, you can separate out those pieces of geometry so you can grade them differently and things like that. But everything was uniquely named. But if you had 2 picture frames, we hadn't uniquely named, like, say, the glass in the picture frames separately from each other. So in the compositing program in Nuke, you end up color correcting all of the picture frames because they all have glass 01 or whatever it was. And so we'd spent a long time trying to make everything unique, but we realized that we hadn't made them unique from each other. That was something I would probably fix to give a bit more flexibility. It wasn't a big deal, but just little things like that, I think. And then I guess just having some kind of infrastructure. The Zoom meetings made a big difference. It sounds like a bit of a slog, but it's really good having the bi-weekly meetings and consistency of that. So I would turn up at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning and I would just go like, hey, like if there was no one here in the meeting, I just start and record them. And then if people showed up, they showed up. And if they didn't, they can rewatch it. But it just meant that people knew there was a structure. And it actually worked out that we'd have quite a lot of people attend, I think, because of that. Because it's not like you're waiting around half an hour for everyone to join and all that stuff, because you never know if people can come or not. So things like that, I think. Consistency, a lot of communication. I would do weekly emails to try and keep people up to date with what was happening. Sorry. Yeah, and just keeping that, I guess, so people can see it's evolving. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Brilliantly. And it brings us right nicely up to the end as well.
Oh, awesome.
You're right on time. So just say thanks again for coming back and joining us. It's been brilliant having you. Can't wait to see you when it... Go on.
Oh, I was going to say, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a dream to talk at Animex. So.
Excellent. Well, we'd love to have you back again, talk about one of your other projects and see you in the movie when it's finished. So thanks very much, India.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Just keep waving.